Morning Live. Now, the Institute of Risk Management, or IRMSA, says that increasing internal conflict within the African National Congress has spilled over into the public discourse, and this is a cause for concern. The organization is of the view that political instability poses a threat not only for business and the economy, but also for society at large. IRMSA says that as the country is still fighting the scourge of the COVID-19 pandemic, citizens are looking for certainty and stability from political leaders to deal with the current environment that has added to the existing economic crisis. Also, service delivery failures and the country's general development has suffered. Berenice Francis is a committee member at the Institute of Risk Management. Berenice, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So let's just explain how exactly the internal warring in the ruling party poses a threat to the country in broader strokes.
So what we've said is that obviously political certainty is quite important in our current environment. We define risk as both a threat and an opportunity. So internal conflict doesn't necessarily always mean a threat. It could also mean that we need to be aware of exactly what the intent is of government. We are going into a municipal election soon, and what we find is that politicking could create a lot of noise and uncertainty. And so organizations need to be exactly aware of what this means for them. What is the impact? How do they assess that? And how do they plan around possible disruption or possible uncertainty in their context? Because fundamentally, organizations are trying to reach specific objectives within the South African environment. And with the higher level of uncertainty, especially having gone through COVID, we're just asking that we should be very clear on what that impact should be for both, whether it's organizations as corporates or for their citizens itself, for their staff.
So one of the issues that the organization raises is that of this election year as an important year, one would imagine. Would it be less of a crisis if this wasn't an election year, for example?
Look, what we do see and what we've learned in the past is that election years are always rife for more politicking. You know, politicians would either make specific promises, and what we do find, particularly amongst our membership, is that we want impact. So making promises for the sake of winning seats is not something that is good for any country. What's important now is we need service delivery, and we need delivery where it makes an impact on business and makes a positive impact, where we actually see citizens that can feel the impact that politicians are making. And one of the things we've already seen is we've already seen a lot of feedback with regards, I don't know if you saw on the latest reports, we had a bit of feedback on the quality of skills amongst not just municipalities, but some of the public servants. And so what we do is we create, we have a lack of confidence in our public service. And I don't think that's good for any citizenry. We need to have a belief that the people who are appointed to either make decisions or implement decisions are competent and are skilled and aren't there because of cadre deployment, for example, which is something that everyone's been talking about. But unfortunately, when we have these type of reports, it just creates a lot more uncertainty as well as mistrust of politicians and officials as a whole.
And obviously, we would want to see some answers to the issues, the challenges that are raised. And IRMSA says that the current scene raises a vital debate on how companies should identify and also respond to these political risks. So how does business and the economic sector at large avoid being casualties and avoid being drawn into these political battles in ways that could prove harmful to everybody in the long run?
Sure. So most organizations would have a very specific framework of how they identify potential risks. And we say potential being that, I always talk about the analogy of if you're driving in a car and you're trying to reach a certain objective. All organizations have very specific strategies, and then they implement specific tactics, right? And they base it on what they understand of the known environment in which they're operating. when we have political uncertainty, it can sometimes, not always, translate into policy uncertainty, as well as to where we have policies now being implemented, not necessarily with taking all stakeholders involved. What we always suggest is you need to understand what your current landscape looks like politically, and then you need to say, well, what are the changes we think, and what type of scenarios should we prepare ourselves for as a business to mitigate some of the possible fallout. And again, risk is not just about a threat, it's also about an opportunity. So if more organizations have the opportunity to take a look and say, okay, what's coming down the road, and how best do we pull our resources to mitigate some of that, so that we can actually mitigate the impact of those risks. That's what we're saying when we speak about a framework. We also need to be honest about the real impact of some of the politicking on our businesses and what noise. Because sometimes if we respond to noise, we can put the incorrect strategy in place. And we've seen this with a lot of false narratives, etc. Now, if you think about deploying resources, you don't want to be deploying resources on things that might never happen. So you need to focus. You need to be clear about what you have influence over, because there is a stakeholder process when new policies are being implemented or enacted, and make sure that you're actively involved, an active citizen, because corporates themselves have a role to play, being employers, being taxpayers. We often, as corporates and the private sector, we're not as vocal. What we have seen over the last year is there's been a lot more activism from the private sector, saying that, we're all part of this broader country. We're all part of South Africa. We all have a vested interest in making South Africa work for us. And therefore, we will work with government. We work a lot more where we will bring in our capabilities. And I think that bodes well for future partnerships. And I think that what COVID's taught us is that anything is possible if we have the will. If we have the political will, and that if we don't get distracted by what we know often will be political rhetoric.
And, people would say, and you're correct in saying we need more active citizenry in the country, but some would say that is easier said than done. And what exactly can the public do in the context of what is currently happening in South Africa? Because you look at the demographics, the demographics play such a vital role. You look at the socioeconomic circumstances, the psychosocial circumstances that people have to contend with in this country. How then would you practically suggest people actually make that leap to become more involved?
Look, I think that South Africa is made up of individuals. Whether it's made up, all countries are made up of individuals, whether it's made up of individual corporates, if it's made up of individual NGOs, people in your street. I think what's always important is that we can't be passive. What the election does, it also provides an opportunity to understand who exactly standing for leadership positions. And, what are they standing for, and are we aligned? And what is their past performance been like? And and I'm talking about every single ward in this country has a ward councillor at the moment and a prospective ward councillor. Don't let that right to vote be taken away from us by being passive and by not being informed about exactly what those issues are. And I think it starts from the grassroots upwards and holding people accountable. I think that when corporates get together and ask questions. So, I think it's important to, we always say, believe, but verify. Don't just blindly believe statements being made, particularly if it's the same rhetoric. Ask for examples of how we've made an impact. So I think every citizen needs to take up their right to vote and actually use that, but understand what those key issues are, and don't blindly just go through another voting cycle, because we do have an opportunity every 5 years, whether it's local elections, whether it's national elections, we have that opportunity to think before we go to the ballot box. So I think that's where it starts. And I also think around being a lot more community focused. Yeah? What we did see with COVID, which was an amazing thing, is a lot more citizens realized that, if your neighbor's not okay, you're not okay. And we needed to actually be a lot more aware of how people were struggling through COVID, whether it was with mental health, whether it was with, poverty, because a lot of people were so close to the poverty line, they actually, because of COVID, got pushed over where they actually couldn't cope anymore. So a lot more community involvement. I saw it in my community. I saw a lot more people getting involved with handing out and supporting people. Let's use that initiative. Let's use that drive to do something good. And not just continue the same cycle where we sit back and we criticize, but we haven't actually gotten our own hands dirty and understood what the key issues are.
Well, Berenice, from your lips to South Africa's ears, hopefully someone has listened and will make a difference. Berenice Francis is a committee member at the Institute of Risk Management, giving us IRMSA's analysis of the impact of critical political analysis in South Africa and also the risk that it poses not only to business but also to society at large. Let's park that one there, take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking SASA matters.